Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I apologize if the voice of this is not good, but I hope it's fine. I just wanted to continue with our discussion of consciousness that we began to embark upon, just quite briefly. So I explained the overall outline of this work, a synthesis of ancient knowledge with modern science. That is what we mean by a theory of consciousness, but not merely a mechanical theory, it's a vision of consciousness, which is a vision of being. And I suppose here I might begin to work through some of the introduction, but I suppose highlighting that this work is a synthesis of many different fields of knowledge. And for that reason, that's why I think being interdisciplinary, there are people of many other fields of their own specialties and research areas who would benefit from engaging in this work. Very explicitly, of course, anyone directly involved in consciousness studies, but really I mean from the perspective of ontology and metaphysics. This type of discussion and work is invaluable. For those who are involved in especially ancient philosophy, well, the whole idea of this work is that the modern idea of consciousness must be reconciled with the ancient idea of being. So if we want ancient philosophy to have any continued relevance in the modern day, we need to bridge this vital connection and maintain this connective nerve by which we can communicate between that which is ancient and foregone and that which is modern and renewed. Moreover, and I think I did mention this, well, not in this video, but my last video on mathematics, that the repristination of consciousness as something fundamentally qualitative, something fundamentally essential, spiritual, we might say, and by that I mean something which subsists in and of itself, which is not material. Consciousness as something which is fundamentally its own category, its own distinct ontological category, not as some epiphenomenon of material conglomeration. But consciousness is an irreducible fact of being. That qualitative renewal is necessary if we would like there to be any qualitative hermeneutic of the quantitative sciences. That is, if we want mathematics, if we want our mathematical sciences of number and structure to have continued meaning, interpretation, to be saying something. Because by definition, facts do not speak for themselves. A fact, by definition, says nothing. A fact is a bit of information divorced of quality. That's what a fact is. If a fact has a mere mechanical true and false value, that means it can possibly have no dimension of quality. And I mean to exclude those things which are fundamental, such as, first propositions, the idea that the one is prior to multiplicity, that the whole is posterior to its part, or prior, sorry, to its parts. I would say these things do not really admit truth values in the ordinary propositional sense. And really it's a philosophy which seeks to reduce these high metaphysical meanings to mere mathematical quantitative axioms. If we want there to be human sciences, sciences which speak to the soul, which speak to meanings, which speak to the fundamental order of things, which have an ethical import, a science which does not merely create the nuclear bomb because it can, but a science which is rested and grounded in ethical ideals, and so which embarks upon a scientific progress with a telos in mind, with a goal and vision in mind, which is fundamentally human. The purpose of scientific creative output is to benefit humanity. Otherwise, it is not an intellectual endeavor. It is not a noble intellectual endeavor to create merely for the sake of creating, because there is no such thing as creating without purpose. Either we know what the purpose is, and it is to the end of goodness, or it is to the end of chaos. Just having scientific work, even mathematical work, without an end in mind, without a unitive vision bringing it together, it is stemming into chaos. And I would argue that is the crisis of the modern sciences. And so the beginning of this work is the crisis, because any work begins with an inception, it's an uncreated foundation, it is a response to a state of affairs. We begin in a crisis, the crisis of modernity. And this work is at least one, it is one piece in a greater work and vision, which seeks to address that crisis. Let me perhaps read a bit of this. So I say that the vision of this work is that the concept and idea of being in mystical philosophy, and therefore in the esoteric heart of all the great world's religions, especially in Islam, in Tasawwuf, Sufism, in Christianity, in Hinduism, in Taoism, at least as far as I know, but really in all the great traditions and philosophies, this mystical philosophy, the idea of being therein. And remember that being is identified, I mean, being is God. The word God refers to the absolute being, which is the source of all existence, that pure, primordial, partless oneness, which is before and beneath all things. This idea, this unfathomable idea, incomprehensible infinitude of being, offers a systematic theory of consciousness. And this is the key, because we begin with consciousness. That the very essence of consciousness, as I just spoke, this irreducible characteristic, if we truly retrieve the very essence of consciousness, and not merely its qualities and its attributes and what it does, its functions, not merely an analysis, because analysis by definition breaks things down. It breaks things into parts. But to break a thing into its parts is to lose a vision of the wholeness of the thing. I can take this table which I am sat upon and cut it into as many parts and analyze them. But the more I do that, and this is what modern science is doing, it's cutting things into parts. Fantastic. The more I do that, the more I break it into its legs and its geometrical infrastructure, and I analyze its chemical constitution and its material composition. The more I do that, the further I am from the original state of totality, which was the table. The more I begin to cut and saw it into its parts, the more distant I am from the very essence of the table, which was not whether it's made of wood, not what particular mathematical configuration it takes, but that there's a form and a meaning, which is something upon which we can put things, something which we use to, something which has a living quality. A table, a dinner table, is a spirit and quality to that, which is not found in any of its parts, but only comes together in the whole. And so to understand the whole, we must synthesize, we must begin with the whole itself and not break it down. And this is what modern science cannot do whatsoever, because modern science is all about breaking things down. It is about breaking and dividing things. The very idea of the atom is cutting things. But no one thought that perhaps there's a meaning to the cosmos as a unity, without breaking it into what it's made of, understanding existence as a whole. What is the meaning of the world? Because you can cut the table as much as you want, and you can find more about its material constitution, about its particular, even its origin, who made it. Was it a carpenter? What was it made from metal, from wood? How was it made? How did it come to be? That is the efficient and the material causes of Aristotle. But the form and ultimately the final end for which it was made, which there was one, that has nothing to do whatsoever with breaking it down. And so the question of what the meaning of the cosmos is, what its fundamental nature is not answered, is not necessarily related to its matter or to its efficient structure. And then there's a circular argument to be had to begin with. I mean, how do we even know what its material structure is? That is a question for another discourse, I believe, but think about it. I mean, what does it mean to actually analyze something under a microscope? We had a thing, now we just have new things. You never asked what the table was, and now you're saying that it's made of these chemicals and these atoms. Okay, but what is an atom? What is a chemical, a molecule? Then you keep breaking it down and going smaller and smaller. But firstly, you haven't answered any of the questions. You never answered what the table was. You never answered what a molecule is. You never answered what an atom is. You just keep going deeper down the rabbit hole. So breaking things down doesn't offer an answer at all to begin with. You can explain every part of the human body without understanding what the human body is. And imagine you've only seen the brain. What's the name called for people who dissect bodies, a cadaver or something like that? And that's the name of the course. I can't remember, but you can dissect human bodies as much as you want, and you can understand every anatomical part of the body. But unless you have seen a living human body, there is something fundamental which you are missing. And so the question of consciousness must begin with consciousness, not trying to break it down into something else, because that does not answer the question. But it is to behold the question, behold consciousness, and to go not particular, but upwards, general, universal, asking what is the fundamental essence of consciousness. So we begin with consciousness rather than matter. That's our foundation. We do not explain consciousness through matter, but we explain matter through consciousness. Because both are valid theories. A theory, a system simply needs to have foundations and build upon its foundations. It has its core premises and principles, and it derives more understanding upon that. That is a theory. As long as it is mathematically sound in its logical character, it is a valid system and theory. What I propose here is, I will not say a new theory, but rather a repristination of the ancient theory, vision of being, which begins with the being itself. It begins with the living quality of being, which is consciousness. That is the fundamental idea in the theistic Abrahamic religions, that God is alive, God is living. That's the fundamental source of all reality, that being itself, in its utterly onely aspects, is alive because life is a fundamental, irreducible quality and essence, which is not an attribute of something. It is not a property of something, but it is the very nature of being itself, that being is to live. To be is to live. To be is to be aware. To be is to be conscious, to perceive, to have knowledge, to see and to hear and to think. That is being. And if one asks, well, what is the proof of that? He has misunderstood what a theory is. What is the proof for the fundamental properties of an atom? Every system has a foundation which you don't prove. That's the whole idea. A proof builds upon that which is unprovable. But secondly, this vision and this philosophy does offer a knowledge of its first principles through self-reflexivity. We get down and down and down, but how do we get down beneath the absolute layer, the absolute ground layer? Well, the ground layer is itself. How can we understand consciousness? Through the consciousness of consciousness. Because we are conscious of our consciousness. And that self-circularity is the key to the puzzle. Because in a material analysis, there is no self-circularity. You keep breaking things down and down and down, and there's no end to it. It's turtles all the way down, as they say. But we begin with the infinite beginning. Rather than beginning with parts and trying to piece them together into the whole. We begin with the whole, and through like an inward refractive light, blasting through a prism and therefore refracting and dispersing into its infinite myriad of colors. We begin with the pure and pristine light of unity, the light of being, the life of consciousness, and we allow this pure unitive understanding, this experience of oneness and harmony to disperse into all the many streams of knowledge. And I suppose I shall end it here, saying that, I mean, I just put this in because for a dissertation we have to create modern connections, but yes, there are connections to what we will call a monistic idealism, panpsychism. This is a very common term in modern philosophy, which is gaining currency. We are reminded of the thought of Spinoza and the German idealists in the modern European tradition, particularly the German idealists. I do think there is something quite profound therewith. What I seek here, however, is to bring to light the intensely mathematical and logical nature of this mystic philosophy, which hitherto has been neglected. If modernity, since the time of Descartes, has become concerned with systematicity, axiomatization, and logicity, that is, our modern obsession with formal structures and the modern ascendancy of quantitative mathematics, then the mystic philosophy has a real claim to be the most systematic, logical, and mathematical theory. And truly I shall end here, because mathematics is not the preserve of modern science. It is truly the heritage of ancient philosophy, because mathematics begins with oneness and proceeds unto multiplicity. And mathematics begins with that which is most fundamental, the pure oneness of all things, the number one itself, the absolute ground of everything. Mathematics begins with the Platonic, the Pythagorean, with the irreducible. Mathematics begins with that which is immaterial, numbers, ideas, that which is universal and general, not that which is particular and specific. So mathematics, I mean, a material philosophy has no claim to that. A material, particular, analytical, modern scientific theory or philosophy or worldview has no claim to mathematics, but it suffers from the problem of induction. How are they to justify the ontological validity of mathematics, in both its ontological and epistemological validity, given a materialist reductionist account? It does not take a philosophical genius to see how quickly this spirals into a self-circular regress, collapsing argument. But the beauty is that philosophy of oneness is mathematics. read Plato and Pythagoras. Mathematics is the philosophy of oneness. We begin with oneness, and from the monad, from the absolute, we allow logic itself in its pure ontological aspect, the logos, the mystical word of God, we allow that to proceed and not from this ground of oneness and this vision of unity and harmony and august clarity. So I shall end this here, and I do hope that the audio captured well.